Hey guys, StarCraft here, and well, continuing on, you guys wanted Jim Starlin? I'm gonna talk about Jim Starlin, and boy howdy am I gonna talk about Jim Starlin. He is in that echelon with Dan Jurgens of someone I am almost guaranteed to buy everything, even retroactively. And yeah, I love so much of his work. I still haven't gotten everything, but what I do have is I have a lot to talk about, and he is in a different echelon, of my favorite writers. You know what I mean? It's like, I just love everything the man's done. His work, his artwork, his writing, everything. And, well, let's get talking about what I do have. And let's start with some of the DC work I have, since the Marvel one's going to take me a lot longer to get through. Let's start off with one of his more notorious ones. Some like it, some don't, given what happened. It caused a lot of controversy. It's one of the most important moments in DC history. Let's talk a little bit about Death in the Family. The death of Jason Todd. This was his last work on Batman, actually. Afterwards, he left and it went into other people's hands. And this was his last story. It was a good one to go out on, especially the way things turned out. Whereas I'm sure you already know, people voted on Jason lives, Jason dies. In the end, to a pretty close margin, Jason died, and well, we get that classic pose of fried Jason. And it's old-fashioned. It feels like a Batman world romp at first, until all of a sudden it swerves and then leads to Joker beating Jason with a crowbar, leaving a bomb, and then boom. But it still feels like a bit of a, it's one of those stories where, yes, you're more in it for the notoriety of the incident, but it's still a fun story, even if it has some weird moments, like Ayatollah Khomeini, or however you say his name is, the Ayatollah having Joker become the ambassador to Israel, so he can then basically release a gas bomb and everything. Yeah, how 80s can you get? And it just feels like, no, Iran, not Israel, Iran. Wow, I do not know my Middle Eastern countries. Iranian Israel. Sorry about that, but still. Then you have that, and they play up a little bit the whole Superman is answering to the government and it's going to toss Batman around. Yeah, that would fly. As far as the stuff I have from him from DC, that's the only thing of his old stuff I have. I still want to get the Hardcore Station miniseries, especially with what I get into. But later on, yeah, like one thing I got to mention about, since the next few stuff, even though I'm not going in chronological, is the deaths of the New Gods. Yeah, Starlin he's a great cosmic creator, don't get me wrong, and he can handle the New Gods a lot better than others, but he's a Walt Simonson, he's not. And okay, big controversial moment, I rank him a little bit above John Byrne, a little bit. Even Byrne, he does his own things with the New Gods, but sometimes it feels like he wants it to be his thing instead of Kirby's. Starlin feels like he's trying to stay true to it, but putting, again, his own spin on it. For example, the Source Wall. Oh, he always came up with the fact that the anti-life equation, the Source Wall, were sentient beings. And, okay, I'll get this out of the way. Starlin, from what I understand, is very notoriously anti-gathered religion and all that. And basically, it reveals that, oh yeah, the Source, all those cryptic messages, he wasn't micromanaging anything. The Source didn't care at all. But for what this is, though, given how he was just assigned to do this, it's not that bad. If it gets very depressing for obvious reasons. But I mean, look at that artwork. I mean, you know Starlin for drawing Thanos, but look how he does Darkseid very well, without having him look like Thanos. And yeah, it leads to a great action sequence, and leads to a great moment that still proves how tough Superman is, and that's, hold on, oh, where is it? Oh, Superman being put in between in a planetoid sandwich. But if there's one moment in this particular story I always chuckle at, it's this bit. Darkseid ruled! The next two trades I got collects his Mystery in Space miniseries, which basically it plays off of the events after. Sorry. It plays off the events after 52, where Captain Comet is killed, and it leads up a little bit before that, and then it shows what happened right afterwards, where he's reborn in a new body. Was great artwork initially by Shane Davis. Sorry about that, I had a phone call interrupt. Anyway, hold on. Oh, where is it? Where is it? Don't you hate when it happens? You had a page and then you lose it. He draws a very good dogs. But this is actually plays off on the hardcore station that was introduced, where basically we're introduced to a few other characters. Captain Comet is used, and then he later goes by Comet to drop it and poses himself as his own nephew, which is interesting. But I mean, it makes sense. You're trying to be like, oh no, I'm not him reborn, because he's trying to get started on a new life and feels like I'm younger, I can act different. Hold on. Oh yeah. The woman here, by the way, her name's I. She was also part of the hardcore station, which is where this sets in. Starlin loves to continue using his own things. But another thing that's also collected in the second trade is The Weird, which was done by Starlin and Bernie Wrightson. A weird miniseries that just told a story about this young and this weird alien guy who took on the body of a dead man, a man who had died, and basically had was trying to stop this greater evil from attacking. And at the end, he basically blows up, and because he's unstable. But it is so heart-wrenching, especially when he meets up with the boy's son, and when he's told what's going to happen, he spends a little bit of time with him, and then look at that. The boy is just crying his eyes out because he knows he's never going to see his dad again, as he just flies off, and then they get him out of the way, and then he just waits for the time to happen, and he blows up. Yeah, but basically the Weird and Comet intercepted, and they kind of crossed DNA and yada yada. It's an interesting story, but what I really like about this is how Starlin, he does the backup stories focusing on the Weird, but then Shane Davis and then later Ron Lim would then do the other stories as well. The Weird will be a backup, but they got closer to the last issue. They basically go back and forth between the two writers and artists, and I really like that. And I mean, yeah, this was an interesting thing that started a lot of plot points that he kind of started up in Hardcore Station, put on the back burner, and then was starting to reignite them a little bit. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. And he started bringing in the, I think the church, no, that's a DC version. He brought in some weird cult, religious cult as well. And then that would later get played up during the Rand-Sanagar Holy War. Yeah, that's an interesting one, alright, and Ron Lim came back and he started using a whole, basically he was playing off on what was done during, from the Rand-Sanagar War, where you had people on Ron on Sanagar, and after events of other works like Countdown to Adventure, he starts showing that after a lot of devastating moments, a lot of people are trying to find religion, and some people are taking advantage of that, yada yada. And yeah, basically a lot of pieces starting to be played as he brings in a character known as Siren, who is basically God's, he's the Demiurge, God's architect. And basically he reveals that where is it? Well, before I go further, he also does stuff with Hawkman. In fact, if it wasn't for Blackest Night, he would have completely undone everything Jeff Johns did by revealing all that Egyptian stuff never happened. It was all a fake construct. by someone who was manipulating things, and that nope, he was entirely a Sanagarian, always had been. But I'll get to more why and playing that up later. But it would have been interesting, but that was obviously one of the things that Starlin had issues with afterwards. And you also had stuff with other bits of quantum time travel with Sinar and Adam Strange. I actually like how it plays out. It goes pretty interesting with how everything works. But eventually we find out that playing a bit off of both Death of the New Gods and here, the Demiurge, again, God's Architect, was basically hiding. He's helped create the multiverse, trying to hide himself from everything, or he took advantage of it. Then, during the events of Hardcore Station, which was kind of shown here, his plans kind of went off the rails, so he had to find a way of getting himself back on track. And another character that Starlin continues using is Lady Styx, a character that Keith Giffen kind of created, and people like to use because she's really powerful, really dangerous, really sick, psychotic. And yeah, basically by the end of it all, though, it ends with the Weird taking absorbing a lot of power and then having himself transported into Sinar until he blows up, taking everything off and basically putting the events of everything on hold for a moment. As Ron, no, this is the part where and people were not on Ron. Sorry, I take that back. Ron was starting to destabilize. No, yeah, something along those lines. But anyway, by the end of it all, Starman, the Space Starman, decides to have everyone be on his planet, and basically now it's known as New Ron, and that's where it ends. Although it ends on Old Ron because it was destroyed after trying to destroy Sinar. We see a figure coming out looking like the Weird. It's not. That's later played up in Strange Adventures, which basically continues on with all the plot points with Sinar and everything. And because of how Blackest Night happened and thus taking Hawkman off the board, it was then decided that in Starlin, he had to be, oh no, same thing happened in universe, change of plans happened, and they had to replace Hawkman, and they replaced him with Bizarro. Yeah, Bizarro. Very interesting, and as the story plays up, it starts getting, the Weird is starting to, he has a lot of Sinar's powers, and he's starting to become even more and more unstable. They're all trying to fix everything, stop it all, and then by the very end, it ends very much like you could tell Starlin realized, yeah, I'm not going to be able to continue this. I got to put it back on hold again. So what does he do? He first has it be that he does want something that even I admit was kind of stupid, and that was ask them all, like, do you want this? I need you people to have some of my power so that I can then unlock your true potentials and everything. And he takes Prince Gavin, and by this point his planet is now damaged. And what happens? Look at this outfit he gives him. Starlin, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm glad that didn't last. But anyway, I decides to realize that he needs them on because after Hawkman's death, things they could be able to replace champions, but now they can't. So what does she do? She blasts herself with her own eye beam from her device and kills herself. Although it was later implied, oh no, she'll come back from the dead. Basically, in other words, it's Starlin wrapping things up, but leaving the door open for like, okay, nothing's gonna happen anytime soon, but if I come back, I'll be able to pick up. He does that quite a bit. That's something he always does. He always seems to have a back door for everything to get out of what mess he's been, but you know, the editorial, whatever's put him in. And he left DC for a while after that until he came back for a brief stint. First to give us the Villain Month issue during Forever Evil on his other creation, Mongol. Yeah, and Thanos was a ripoff of Darkseid, and Mongol's a ripoff of Thanos. Go figure. It's nice. You have artwork by Howard Porter, and yeah, he kind of writes him up like, you know, typical Mongol, and really you can't do much more as Mongol, really. Then he was given a stint of taking the Stormwatch characters and then reworking up so they were a different team using the old logo and everything. And basically, he brings in the weird and all that, and he tries to make it a bit more closer to old school Stormwatch as opposed to the more authority-like version of Stormwatch that was running around New 52. The problem is that he had to kill off a character, Adam 1, who also was Merlin, so that would throw us stuff with Demon Knights, and it basically changed history. I mean, literally rewrote all of history. But it seemed like they were going to lead up to things getting straightened out, like this wasn't going to be a permanent change. They even bring Lobo into it. And basically by the end of it all, they reached to an end point, and then there was one more issue left. The Stormwatch, they basically had the original team show up, push the other one aside, and be like, yeah, that never happened. Completely ignoring it, acting like, oh, and they beat up the bad guys all off screen in between pages, and they did one more issue to just wrap everything up. And that's a crying shame, because it wasn't bad. It wasn't that great, but it wasn't bad. It was just fun. Well, that's the DC work. Now on to the main event, where I'm going to probably take the bulk of my time with his Marvel stuff. First, let's talk with the life and death of Captain Marvel. Yes, the male Captain Marvel. This is just damn good. It's a classic, where basically he took over for Captain Marvel and was told to fix everything. And he does. He brings in his character Thanos that he introduced earlier in Iron Man. And using other things, had Thanos get his hands on the Cosmic Cube, or Tesseract if you want. And then he basically becomes all-powerful. And Marvel has to gain the ability of the Enigma, no, not the Enigma Force, the oh geez, what was it called again? The Cosmic Awareness. And I love this one bit where he used to have white hair or silver hair. He then points out, I had blonde hair, and he had to point out, how do you know? And not Ego, but Eros or whatever. He's one of the other sentient beings. Basically, like, how would you know that your hair is blonde without a reflective surface or a mirror? And another thing I like that they do is that basically they have a point where there was a prior story that he always ate up on, where he lost the ability to bring back a loved one of his. So they show, okay then, this is what would have happened if you would have gotten it. And she attacks him. Basically show that, oh yes, if that original story had played out the way you wanted, she would have come back, but without a soul. Basically clearing up a loose end that was a plot point that obviously has been haunting him for so long. Basically saying like, yeah, be glad you didn't win. Then, by the end of it all, Thanos is able to utilize the power. Oh yeah, this is during the time when Marvel is bonded with Rick Jones. And then eventually gets to a point where where Thanos uses the cube, absorbs all of his power, leaving just the empty container, and he eventually becomes a god. And to the point where Rick basically taunts Thanos to come in and they fight, leading to the climactic conclusion: Thanos, the insane god. And Marvel and Thanos fight and fight and fight and fight and fight until they realize that Marvel realizes, wait, Thanos has become a god, but he doesn't have worshippers, and a god needs worshippers to keep their power going. So what does he realize? Despite throwing the cube aside, he still needs it. You destroy the cube, you stop everything. So he smashes the cube, and Thanos is completely defeated. And this was also when we were first introduced to Lady Death as well. But the other thing is that we never found out how Thanos survived. we will later, and I will get to that. But yeah, and not long afterwards, we're introduced to the character of Nitro, who blows up a gas container that that Marvel breathes in, and then it leads into the ever classic Death of Captain Marvel story, where Marvel is dying of cancer. Yeah, even Spider-Man knows that thing. We die from. Hold on, it's such a good line. I don't want to screw it up. We die from bullets and bombs, not from something like cancer. It just can't be. And Beast tells him, I'm afraid it is. It's so dramatic to the point where, by another story point, between the end of that and this point, when Thanos had returned, what this was in the Avengers and the Marvel 2-in-1 annuals, where he basically tries to utilize, and this is also when he Starlin utilizes Adam Warlock series that never got resolved, and he basically gives them a great finale, and then have Thanos get his own finale. Mostly involving first Spider-Man, the Thing, and then all the other Avengers, and eventually ends with, for a brief moment, Warlock coming back, going after Thanos, and turning him into stone. And then and it's a very good one. I got this little collective one-shot. It collects both of them. Well worth it. Then, during the deaths, you have Thanos in Frozen, but in a dream state, he comes out to give Marvel one last battle. Or a race, anyway. And then they both make their way up to the top of where they're going, where they meet with death. And basically they both decide to head up, and then at that same moment, he dies. Yeah. Again, it's one of the best deaths Marvel's ever done, and even when they've tried to toy bring him back, they always have it be, no, this happened in between him getting cancer before he dies, before they usually chicken out afterward. But even then, they're more willing to say, oh no, he ain't back forever, he's got to leave at one point, but then they reveal it was never him or whatnot, or it was a displaced version. But eventually, Thanos is freed and resurrected during the Thanos quest. This is one of the first times you had Starlin and Ron Lim working together. It was a two-part story that basically had Thanos dealing with all of the elders of the universe, gathering up the gems, so that he could have a chance to utilize it. You know, Death wanted him to wipe out half the life in the universe. Yes, that was there, but it was because Death asked him to, not because he felt like it would bring balance. He just wanted some of that necrotic action. But again, just so much of the stuff that Starlin's writing, it's very good. And yeah, it sometimes feels like he makes Thanos very much a villain too, and in a lot of ways he does. But eventually, at the end of it, it ends with Thanos getting the Infinity Gauntlet, leading into this classic story. First, initially with George Perez, and then later on with Ron Lim again. You have that ever famous moment of Thanos snapping his fingers. The funny thing is though, it starts off with that moment. Most events would have built up to it, but no, you have most of the build-up be in this, away from the heroes, because it was so on space the heroes couldn't do anything, and we're just dealing with the effects here. And again, it's really good as everyone goes in the fight, everyone's dealing with the aftermath of everything, and yeah, we have some great moments. You have Thor being turned to glass and then shattered. And then you have, there's a moment where people keep on acting like, oh, this is one of Captain America's best moments. And where his Cap is staring down Thanos. And then he punches Thanos, but then look what happens right immediately afterwards. Thanos just swats him around like it was nothing. People, I think, overplay that moment way too much. I mean, it's awesome. Don't get me wrong. He's staring down God. But at the same time, though, it feels like people act like, oh, that was awesome where he punched him like in a full page spread. No, it was one panel, then immediately after, and he didn't care. Some of you guys saying, oh, he gave Cap respect. He didn't give him jack shit. Also during this whole stuff, you had Silver Surfer number 50. Just want to show this one off. Kind of fixes some of it, the Surfer's origins. Afterwards, about a year later, you had the follow-up, Infinity War, where a character connected to Warlock known as the Magus arrives. He's trying to do this whole plan to take over, creates these doppelgangers of the heroes, which is where we get the infamous Spider doppelganger from Maximum Carnage. It only appears briefly before it's killed off, but then it showed. They realized, hey, we got something here, and they kept it around. Let me find it. Yeah, that guy. And again, throughout all this, it's just a nice little action romp. They've stopped the Magus, but it's also more so than the first story, where you realize this is more about Thanos, Warlock, and all of the Guardians and the Infinity Watch characters. All the heroes are there, kind of tacked on. I mean, there's some great moments actually, like this point where a gamma bomb goes off while everyone's in the room, and you think, oh, they're all dead, but you see that Sue Richards, Invisible Woman, gathers it all into a force field, and then Thor sends it out into space. That's pretty awesome. Then there was the end of that trilogy known as Infinity Crusade, which takes again to the religious elements, where the goddess, that's if the Magus was Adam Warlock's his good bad side, this is his pure good side, but even she's just as bad. And basically by the end of it starts giving people, like, some people are gonna be like, oh, I can grant you miracles. Some are willing to join her, some aren't. They fight, they stop, and they do stop her in an even more convoluted way, I think, than the Magus. At least the Magus felt a bit more straightforward. This one, not as much. But yeah, it wraps up with that. Then we eventually got to another trilogy of books that Starlin would do. First one was after some stuff during you had Thanos appearing in some weird appearances, like in Kazar, where Kazar beat him. Yeah, Kazar beat him, even though Mark Waid tried to give explanation to why it happened. It was never meant to be Thanos, but it ended up being him. Then you had him showing up in here during the Celestial Quest. And then he also appeared in Thor, where he gets killed off as well. Each one, though, playing and ignoring all of Starlin's characterizations, where by this point, Thanos is no longer wanting the nihilistic, I want to destroy everything, just mwahaha. And instead, you know, he was like, no, I want to be my own person, doing my own destiny. So what does he do? He does this story, Infinity Abyss, where Thanos, in another infamous moment, reveals that all of those past appearances and everything were clones or doppelgangers or whatnot. And basically some of them got set free. It leads to them having to deal with a being that's basically the anchor of reality. He dies and everyone else dies. And then by the end of it all, we are then introduced to basically the final boss of this whole thing. A Thanos clone of Galactus called the Omega. Yeah, thankfully it was a failed prototype, so they only did it as an experiment. So eventually they defeat him, Thanos wins, a new anchor is given up and brought in, yada yada, and it's a nice little self-contained story that did what Starlin wanted to do, and that was fix Thanos. Then came this, Marvel and Marvel The End. This one is interesting. I don't think Starlin really knew what the end really meant. He was given this opportunity. It was just another Thanos story. And seeing as though, despite what Tom Brevoort says, and good lord, Tom Brevoort keeps screwing Starlin over, Brevoort keeps saying, this is not canon, this is not canon. And yet later stories would keep referencing this stuff. With the main bad guy being known as hold on. He is known as, oh, where is he? Akinten. And he would keep showing up whenever Starlin would talk about the older, prior stuff. And so obviously referencing this story, and yet Tom Brewer would keep on saying, nope, doesn't exist. He doesn't exist. Nope, nope, doesn't exist. And basically throughout all of this, most of the Marvel Universe is just wiped out. You had all the Avengers just, actually no, we get to earlier where the guy, the Pharaoh, basically comes to the Avengers saying, give you a chance, they're ready to attack. They disappear because he has the power infinite. You know, literally, he has basically God's power from the heart of the universe that we find out later on. Or at least he has a tampon of it. And he even gets to a point where he can find a spirit, kill it. Yeah, he kills a spirit right there. And then what else did he do next then? He then realizes he's being sent by the gods and kills them all except for Zeus and Thor. And basically everyone is whittled down until it's just Thanos, who eventually makes his way to the heart of the universe, gets in there, and becomes a pure god. Undoes everything that was done, but because Thor was one of those who still knew what was going on and was reminded of it, and he gathered up everyone, they decided, we gotta go stop Thanos. They do, and Thanos, finally just being so furious by what everyone just attacking him, he absorbs the entire everything into him, leaving only a black void. Now by this point, Thanos had realized there's something off going on. Basically that ever since Marvel Man's resurrection long ago, things have been a bit. Hold on a second. Sorry about that false alarm, but basically he realized that something was causing an imbalance that was slowly building. Now, when he put the universe back, it seemed like it was fixed, or so it seemed. But basically, at the end of it all, Thanos puts everything back, and it seems like Thanos is dead. It might have well been called Thanos the End, but it was the Marvel Universe the end, and it then led into this, where Thanos got his own ongoing. Starlin would only last on for so long, and then he would leave before Keith Giffen would take over. But during this point, it introduced a villain known as Hunger. And Thanos basically, he tries to make amends for all of his past deeds, even having a dealing with Galactus. Where actually at one point, hold on. Oh, where is it? Well, it's not here, but there's a point where even Thanos knocks Galactus right off his feet. I mean, literally right off his feet. But by the end of it all, then, oh, here it is. Wow. But then, turns out, Galactus was being manipulated by Hunger to use the gems to make a portal, making Starlin and making Galactus think that he was going to have a way of ending his hunger, which is something he's been wanting for a long time. And then, eventually, instead though, he releases Hunger, and Hunger's ready to consume everything, become one with the universe. One other thing I do like, though, is prior to this, there was one case where the Malibu universe had crossed over, and it ended at one point with one of the heroes having one of the Infinity Gems. So what does Galactus do? Opens up a portal, pulls out the corpse of it, and gets the gem back. No, it obviously doesn't look like the character who died, but if you know anything, that's what he did. Then at the end, Galactus and Thanos team up, stop Hunger, supposedly, and they basically, although there's a little bit of him left, and Thanos makes on his way, eventually going into Annihilation by Keith Giffen again, playing off of from this, where he died, and then he came back during the Thanos Imperative, leading then into the last chunk I'm going to be talking about, and some of the best stuff that Starlin has done. In the first trilogy of graphic novels, Thanos the Infinity Revelation, with an interlude with Thanos versus Hulk, then Thanos the Infinity Relativity, with an interlude with the Infinity Entity, and then the Infinity Finale. At least for that chunk anyway. And during this point, it actually plays off with stuff that was set up from the end, where he finally realizes there's two universes trying to merge in here. And basically Thanos and Adam Warlock, who's resurrected again, try to fix everything. And at the very end of it all, turns out it all leads into the two universes meeting. One Thanos being wiped out, the 616 Adam Warlock being wiped out. The other universe is Adam Warlock being stuck here. And at first, it seems like all he got out of it was a new costume look. And the fact that he's a new person. But turns out it was a lot more than that. But this ends up being a bit more like one of those two-part trilogies, where the first part is completely self-contained and the other two are not. But first, during Thanos versus Hulk, this is originally supposed to be during a Hulk ongoing before I decided, no, let's put him in his own miniseries. Everyone loves Thanos. Everyone loves Jim Starlin. Even though it's mostly about Hulk versus Annihilus, Thanos does not really participate that much into this, but it sets things up for infinity relativity. For example, playing off of from with Annihilation, where a new Annihilus was born. Annihilus, he's puny. And yet, when it's like, of course, people are going to ask, wait a minute though, when we saw him before, he was much bigger. Robot. Ask them to have it melted down. And then basically they take the Hulk's blood, uses it to eventually make him Annihilus Hulk. And I love this. Big bug, I think. Hulk still smash. They would say Annihilus Hulk. By the end of it all, Hulk wails on Annihilus, gets sent back to Earth. Annihilus is now uber powerful. Thanos has kept an eye on everything, leading into this, where Annihilus is ready to make another push on the positive universe from the negative zone. And basically by the end of it all, things start to go to hell as Adam Warlock, the other Adam Warlock, his power is starting to go out of control a little bit. He's feeling, because we later find out he has all the energies from his universe in him. Basically, he has, literally the power of a universe within him. And eventually the ability to warp reality. But at the end of it all, Annihilus gets his hands on Adam Warlock. And with a little trickery from one of the Annihilus's scientists, we have Thanos stuck in basically teleportation limbo. And Thanos realizes the only way for me to get out of here is basically he commits suicide, because he knows if he dies, Death will be able to bring him back and send him back out again. Takes a little while, but he does. Then during this, we have artwork with Alan Davis, but we also have the annual that explains that question of what happened to Thanos after the death of Captain Marvel. And it turns out, during that time, Mephisto got to him and was ready to torture him, until during his time having the gauntlet, turns out Thanos had sent out little bits of himself to answer some questions, one of which was this very question, because he didn't remember it. And basically he starts showing himself off, and he realizes, oh, that's what happened. So when I leave, you're either going to forget about this, and that's why I forgot about it. So we find out what happened. It starts hinting off the stuff in Infinity Finale. And then during Infinity Entity, we mostly focus on Adam Warlock as he's trying to get answers to what's going on. He thinks he's escaped from Annihilus's clutches. We then meet up with the doctor that's been helping Annihilus. Hold on. I don't remember what his name is exactly, but basically we find out it's Mephisto. Mephisto is completely in disguise as he's manipulating everything, and we also find out that Adam Warlock, it's a projection. He's caused so much destruction. He's just a projection, while his body is still in his head. And at the end of it all, despite Adam Warlock trying to give Mephisto a warning, Mephisto feels like, you're talking to the king of lies. I know when I'm being fooled, even though he's not. And at the end of this, Adam Warlock is put back unconscious. Mephisto turns back into being the doctor as he leaves, leading to this that basically starts off with basically a big, huge action war trying to stop Annihilus, eventually leading to Adam Warlock waking up. Now, by this point, Ron Lim took over artwork for this final story, And basically at the end of it all, we kind of give a different moment of Adam Warlock waking up, but he wipes out everything in the universe. Everything. Everything is gone. But then he brings Thanos back. He realized Thanos could help him. And at the end, what do? They go to the one who sits above all. In other words, God, for help. Yeah. And basically they make an agreement. Because by this point, by Secret Wars, the event, the Living Tribunal have been killed. So they decide, let's make this Adam Warlock the new Living Tribunal. Bring back the regular Adam Warlock, having him be back. And then, yeah, he basically, at the very end of it all, God will allow them to refix everything. Thanos gets his time with Lady Death, finally. And there's still a little bit of a hint off that there's two Thanoses, and I think Donny Cates plays up on that a little bit. That there's another one out there. That's the one that he's been using. And at the very end of it all, you have the other Adam Warlock as the Living Tribunal. So, wraps things up. Even got one story with the Guardians of the Galaxy, Mother Entropy. It's just a little fun story. Doesn't tie into anything, but that's Alan Davis artwork again. Then it leads into 2 out of his 3 final Thanos story. Infinity Siblings, Infinity Conflict, and eventually soon Infinity End. And by this point, it's a glorious story where during this point we wrap up the stuff. Turns out Hunger's still out there. He's taken care of. We actually get Thanos dealing with Kang the Conqueror, someone he's never really dealt with much of. And Eros, his brother, comes back. He's much older now. The artwork in this one is great by Alan Davis still. And then he eventually, we find out he sees his future self. And, hold on. Yeah, his future self. And is now the embodiment of death. And when Mr. Death shows up, she realizes what's going to happen. She's pissed. And basically, his future self isn't telling him what's going to be happening from now on. And at first, it seems like Thanos is going to do what he can to stop it. But then during the Infinity Conflict, he can't. Turns out this whole time, his future self is controlling his every move. Basically bringing about him becoming his empowered self sooner. Because now, thanks to hunger being dealt with, Thanos is not, his future self doesn't have to worry about dying like he did. And basically it starts building up. This is a case where it is building into a big climax. But by this point, Thanos has taken all those powers, even Galactus' power. And by the end of it all, we have Eros and Adam Warlock working together. Eros has been met up with Lady Death, but then kicked out from her kingdom and from her place. So now she is, he's now tainted like Thanos. It's needed. At the very end of it all, Thanos is now, all the embodiments of the universe are within him. He doesn't just have the heart of power, he is becoming the universe. And we don't know how it's going to get resolved, but it is one of the most dangerous Thanos has been. And I'm just like, how are they going to wrap this up? I cannot wait for that. But you just have, when it comes to the cosmic universe, Starlin knows how to use it all. It's one of my influences. He's one of my influences when I think of cosmic level threats and everything. So, and Thanos, yes, he sometimes comes out like a villain too under his pen, but at the same time, there's such a good, rich character to him. And yes, he's still going to lose at the end. You know that's going to happen. And a lot of times, it makes sense. He leaves himself wide open, things like that. Or he's destined to lose because deep down, he doesn't, he doesn't deserve the power. Yada, yada. And, well, yeah, that's Jim Starlin for you. Love the man's work. Glad you guys voted on him. And that's all I gotta say. Let's see what we come up with next time. Hopefully I'm gonna have a special review tomorrow. If not, it'll be another creator spotlight. But I do plan on having a special review with a special guest. But we'll see one day. Take care.